Chaos, how we doing? How was your week? I know you can't answer, so I will answer for you. I am doing great. My week was fantastic. I actually spent the week in North Carolina with my brother. He was getting married at a wedding. It was bonkers. It was great. Great time. Great time to be alive. But listen, if you want to see people stressed out, go to a wedding. It's real. It's crazy. Anyway, we are in our final week of Stressed Out, our series we've been doing all March long, and this is our final house parties of the month of March, which is wild. We have been talking about how to handle stress and pressure in our lives, and about how or does it change at all being a follower of Jesus, how we handle stress and pressure in our life. And to put it simply, yes, it changes a lot, and for the better, might I add. Over the past month, we have focused on this passage in Matthew 11, where Jesus is speaking to a group of people and he tells them where they can find real rest. And that's what we've been focusing on the whole month. We talked first about how we can find rest in who Jesus is, that he's God, creator, sustainer, provider, healer, that he's full of grace, love, compassion, forgiveness, all these things, that he can handle whatever's going on, and that he already handled it. We also talked about how we can find rest in who Jesus welcomes, who he invites to himself. So the spoiler alert, it's everybody, all. He says, come to me, all who are weary. We're all fried and exhausted in some way, shape, or form, and Jesus invites us to himself. We don't have to clean it up or fix it beforehand. We can bring our mess to him, actually, which is awesome. And all right, so we're in the final week. So this week we want to talk about one more thing. We want to talk about how we can find rest in what Jesus gives. We can find rest in who he is, we can find rest in who he welcomes, and we can find rest in what he gives. Remember, our passage is Matthew 11, 25 through 30. This week I just want to read that last part, 28 through 30. It says this. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am lowly," or gentle, "and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So Jesus invites us to him. He invites us to take up his yoke. He wants to give us rest, and he wants to do it by giving us a different yoke, his yoke. We talked a few weeks ago about what a yoke actually was. My mind always goes to the egg yolk. Yeah, that's not what we're talking about here. A yoke was this thing that farmers would use. It was made out of wood. They would put it on the neck of cattle, and then that cattle could do work. It could pull a plow. It could be controlled in a way, shape, or form to make farming and agricultural stuff easier to do, because the cattle would pull the brunt of the weight and burden and would do most of the work for the farmer. Basically, they would put the wooden yoke on the cattle would pull, then the plow, and the farmer would direct it and maneuver it in a way that would benefit farming. He could then plant seeds, or he could do all that kind of jazz. Cattle did the work, farmer used the yoke to get the cattle to do the work. You see what I'm saying here? Yeah. So the animal in that situation is carrying the tough yoke. It's carrying like a heavy yoke. It's doing all the work itself. It's carrying the heavy burden. It's obviously weary, probably because it's pulling and doing all the work itself. Also, in ancient culture, the word yoke also had this connotation that it was of submission, that it was something submitting to another thing. It was communicating the idea that he or she or whatever animal was submitting to another person or thing. So Jesus is offering us a new, different yoke, because the yoke we currently have is running us into the ground. Back in the day, when Jesus was talking to these people, the pressure and the stress they probably felt was from something called the law. Now, the law back in Jewish days, these laws were wild. There were actually 613 of them, to be exact. And you had to do all of them. You had to meet the standards of all of them to, I guess you could say, earn God's favor or be in right standing with God. And if you messed any of the 613 laws up, you had to go to the temple and make a sacrifice to fix the wrong that you had made. And these religious leaders at this time had kind of been adding, just creating this unattainable, unachievable level of perfection that people just absolutely could not meet. Yeah, naturally, nobody could keep up under that kind of stress and pressure to keep that much in order. Now, today, we're not trying to follow 613 crazy laws to earn God's favor or people's favor. But don't get me wrong, we have created our own new yoke. We've made our own set of rules in our mind, or someone has put another set of rules on us to meet and to earn favor of our friends, of our parents, of our coaches, of our employers, or even sometimes in our own case, of God, the way that we see it. I've got to get these kind of grades. I've got to get into this kind of school. I've got to get this kind of job. I've got to make this much money. I've got to have these kinds of clothes. I've got to have this many followers or likes. I've got to make this team. I've got to score this many points on this team. I have to be the star of this team. I have to earn this role. I have to get this part. I have to be in this club. I have to be this kind of person, or I have to be that kind of person. We put those on us. That is our new yoke. So we're not necessarily trying to obey laws about when and when we should not kill a goat or anything like that. But we have created our own yoke and we have taken on our own burden, and man, it is heavy. The stress to achieve all of that is daunting and exhausting. There is so much for us to do. Our list just never seems to end. It seems like we will never finish the to-do list we've made for ourselves. But Jesus offers us something different. Jesus offers us a different way. He wants to give us something different. Jesus offers us his yoke, a new way of life, a life with him, a life yoked to him, because his yoke is easy and light, because he already did all the work. So it's not that we come to Jesus and then Jesus hands us this laundry list of things we have to do and not do in order to be a Christian, in order to be a follower of Jesus. Jesus doesn't say, hey, do all these things and you'll find rest and peace. That's not how it works at all. The yoke Jesus gives us is one where we live in response to all that he has done for us. We are not trying to do all these things to earn anything from him. He instead gives us himself, and he gives us himself freely. God made you and I. He made all of us, and he loves us infinitely more than we can understand. In fact, I always put it this way: his love for us is always maxed out. There is nothing you and I can do to make his love go up or to make his love go down. And believe me, you and I have done a lot of things that could easily, in my mind, make his love go down, but it hasn't gone down at all. And Paul tells us in Romans that actually, while we were royally messing everything up in the world, God loved us enough that he actually sent his son Jesus to the cross for us. He demonstrated that love for us in the midst of us messing everything up. Then Jesus, after his death on the cross, rose back to life, defeated death, defeated sin. Now he wants to have a relationship with you and I, and he wants to offer us a full life, a life with him, a life in relationship with him. We are living in response to that. Our lives are now lived out of response to how he loves us, how he accepts us, how he cares for us, and how he saved us. Because when we come to know Jesus, the pressure is off because he already won. He already did all the work. So Jesus offers us his yoke. He carried and carries the burden, and we get to live a life in response to him doing all that work for us, and we get to live in a relationship with him. We will not find a way out of pressure and stress by doing more and trying harder. We will find peace and rest when we come to Jesus, when we rest in him. A yoke means submission, right? So what does it mean to take up Jesus' yoke? Well, if a yoke means submission, it means I simply submit to him. I admit that Jesus' way of life is the right way of life. I acknowledge that obeying and following Jesus is what will lead me to peace and rest in a full life. It means I live how Jesus calls me to live in his word. Taking Jesus' yoke means we understand that our own way of life, our own yoke that we had put on ourselves, is actually running us into the ground. The pressure was too much. We now want to submit because we realize Jesus' way of life, Jesus' yoke, is so much better. He knows what he's talking about because his yoke is light and easy. His yoke is the way to rest. We go to him and we allow him to lead the way. Jesus has the better way of life, and what he offers us with that better way of life is rest from the stress and from the pressure. What he wants to give us is easy and light, because he wants to give us a relationship with him where he already did the hard work, and he's willing to carry the heavy things now. We just have to take his yoke. We just have to submit to his way of life. And that way is where we live in response to the amazing things he's already done for us. Jesus invites us to learn from him, which is another way of saying, be my disciple or be my follower. It's someone who follows while trying to be like the person they're following. There is a huge amount of peace and rest knowing that we don't have to figure life out on our own. Instead, we get to follow the one who made us, knows us, and already knows the way to a full life now and an eternal life. So that's where we get beyond ourselves. Following Jesus is where we find freedom. It's where we find peace, where we find rest, and I mean rest for our souls. Jesus declares his yoke is easy, and that doesn't mean life will be perfect and simple. It doesn't mean nothing bad will ever happen because I'm with Jesus. It doesn't mean we won't have any struggles or any future stress in life. It means instead that when the stress comes, when the trouble comes, when the tough times come, you and I, we're not alone. It means we are walking through this life with Jesus. We are walking with the one who can handle anything that comes up because he's already handled the worst of it. So we need to go to him. And the best part is in Jeremiah 29:13, God tells us that if we look for him, if we try to go to him, if we seek him, we'll find him. And he will give us rest. And I mean rest from the stress of school and work, and rest from the stress of always trying to earn and achieve our way into love and acceptance and worth. So when the stress and the pressure come into your life, and they will, go to Jesus. He invites us to come to him. He and his yoke, his way of life, submitting to his way of life is where we'll find rest. Rest beyond schoolwork and work. Rest for our souls. I won't see you next week because of spring break, but I'll see you at Rush for April.